Tonight, coronavirus infiltrates frontline health services with 3 Alfred Hospital ward staff and 4 patients infected. Also tonight, the Army called in to enforce strict new quarantine laws for all new arrivals to Australia. Heartbreak for IVF patients as COVID-19 pushes back treatments and elective surgery. And the mission to collect Australians stranded overseas and bring them home. Good evening, Tamara Oudyn with ABC News. It's emerged the coronavirus has made its way into the healthcare system, the outcome many had been warning of and fearing. 3 ward staff at the Alfred Hospital have tested positive, along with 4 patients, 2 of whom have died. The hospital is now testing and contact tracing in a desperate attempt to stop the virus spreading. More on that in a moment, but first, here's where things stand in Victoria tonight. In the past 24 hours, 54 new cases have been confirmed, taking Victoria's total to 574, of which 171 have recovered. There were no further deaths today. The toll is still sitting at 3, but it's been confirmed 2 of those 3 who died yesterday were cancer patients at the Alfred Hospital. State political reporter Richard Willingham joins me now from the Alfred. So, Rich, what more do we know about those cases?
Well, good evening, Tam. These cases are at the Alfred Hospital, one of Melbourne's biggest and most important hospitals. Now, what has happened is there's 4 inpatients at the haematology and oncology ward have been infected. Unfortunately, 2 of those have died, and that's part of those 3 men that were confirmed dead yesterday as part of coronavirus. Also, 3 staff members have also tested positive, and they are obviously at home, and other staff are also self-isolating. Now, they do not know where this transmission came from or the contact of this, and that's still being investigated, so access to that ward is now limited. The Alfred Hospital is saying this is a reminder of just how contagious this virus is and how deadly it can be, particularly for those vulnerable people. And the message is, if you are feeling unwell, you must stay home, and everyone else should be doing their bit to stay at home.
Rich, the Premier's talked a tough game on the need for further restrictions. Do you have a sense of how far away they are?
Well, all week the Premier has talked very tough, if you like, about it's not a matter of if, it's just a matter of when Victoria moves to a stage 3 lockdown. Now, he said that on Wednesday, and he's prepared for Victoria to go it alone and not wait for other states. Now, there has been a national meeting of that cabinet today, including the Prime Minister and other premiers. Now, Victoria is not moving to a stage 3 lockdown tonight or this weekend so far, but the Premier was happy with that meeting, and he explained why to reporters, why we haven't moved to a stage 3 lockdown just yet.
There will be a stage 3, exactly when and its exact nature, and how long it will run for, and what we expect that it will do to case numbers, to the curve. That is not for today. I've got lots of people saying to me, when will we take another step? When will this be over? I understand that, and it is deeply frustrating not to be able to give people the answers to those sorts of questions.
The Premier there. Rich, there were lots of people out and about today. It's really feeling like the message about staying at home if you can, it's just not getting through.
Yeah, there's a lot of frustration while we have businesses closing down or sending people to home from work. There's also the county court is basically not going to be doing much until April now because of this coronavirus. Other people aren't heeding this warning. Beautiful day here in Melbourne today, and people did go to the beach despite urgings and warnings not to go there. And what the concern is that people are congregating in large groups, and of course that's where some of the contagion can go. Now, as a result of this afternoon, the Port Phillip Council have decided to close the beaches and move people on, with police also coming in to move people along because they're simply not listening to the message to not gather in public places, and people need to remain home, and that's not an excuse to have people over either. And the Premier, when he learnt about what's going on at the beaches, had some very stern words.
No one should be at the beach, and if I have to take action to prevent people from going to the beach, I will. If you choose to be at the beach, then that is a choice that may cost someone their life.
Australians returning from overseas will now be sent straight into quarantine. From midnight tomorrow, anyone arriving in the country will be forced to self-isolate in a hotel or other facility in the city where they land, regardless of where they live. The Prime Minister has enlisted the Defence Force to help state and territory police enforce the new rules. It comes as the Morrison government puts the finishing touches on a rescue package to help businesses bounce back after the crisis. Jane Norman reports from Canberra.
5-star luxury hotels like these are being transformed
by no later than midnight tomorrow
into quarantine zones for returning travellers.
For the 2 weeks of their mandatory self-isolation.
Australians arriving at airports will no longer be trusted to simply sign a declaration, go home and self-isolate.
This is enforceable by law.
They'll now be taken straight to hotels and other accommodation.
The ADF will be there to support those enforcement authorities.
This is life and death. There's too much at stake.
Why? 2/3 of Australia's coronavirus cases have come from overseas.
The single most important thing we can do is completely stop the capacity for any returning traveller transmitting the virus.
The next challenge, slowing the transmission within the community, and that means social distancing. Early indications suggest Australians are starting to get the message.
Thank you. Keep doing it. You're saving lives.
But that's no reason to be complacent. The nation's top doctor worried as the number of coronavirus cases tops 3,000.
We can't have anyone breaking the rules, being stupid, being cavalier.
There's nothing cavalier about state and federal leaders as they confront what the Prime Minister calls the twin crises, health and economic.
Both will take lives. Both will take livelihoods.
The government's forced businesses to close, putting hundreds of thousands of Australians out of work. For now, existing restrictions will remain. No plans for further shutdowns yet.
I'm going to make sure I fight for every job I can.
The government's working on a radical plan to push the economy into hibernation so that businesses can spring back to life once the health emergency is over and rehire workers. Banks, lenders and landlords will all be asked to wear some of the pain, waiving overheads including rents and mortgage repayments for at least the next 6 months. It's all part of another economic rescue package to be unveiled within days. While the domestic challenge can be overwhelming, this is a catastrophe of global proportions. In an emergency meeting of world leaders, the Prime Minister promised to look out for Australia's Pacific neighbours.
We should brace ourselves, I think, for some very devastating images.
Hard to fathom how it could get much worse. Jane Norman, ABC News, Canberra.
There were more job losses across Australia today. Adventure chain Kathmandu has closed, standing down more than 1,000 staff. It means more people in the growing unemployment line. But there is a little good news, with some companies hiring in big numbers. Jonathan Hare reports.
Shock turns to anger.
To fight back against these rotten companies.
A loud protest for stood-down ferry workers in Sydney.
Protect our ferry workers! Protect public transport workers! Drop of a hat, they've just been hung out to dry. I think it's really poor form by the company.
There was a small protest outside Qantas HQ too.
Demanding that workers don't pay for this crisis.
Away from the picket lines, these signs are popping up in every suburb as Australian workers are dealt more blows. Among them, adventure store Kathmandu has now closed. About 1,300 workers stood down. It's also shut its surf brand Rip Curl. The shuttering of stores by some estimates will see Australia's unemployment more than double to 11% in the coming months, which means scenes like this could become increasingly common.
So we're going from about 800,000 odd job seeker payment recipients based on the Treasury costing assumptions, another million on top of the 800,000 that are currently there.
But there's a little good news on the horizon. Woolworths is looking to hire 20,000 workers over the next month.
The majority of the roles are replenishment, so what's most important for us is that we keep stock on shelves for our customers and also customer service.
5,000 of those jobs will be offered to former Qantas workers, and it's not the only organisation hiring. State and federal government departments, Telstra, Domino's, even mining giant BHP are just some taking on staff.
We are seeing a lot of opportunities in areas such as warehousing, call centres, cleaners and healthcare, probably the big ones that are coming through at the moment.
Roles which will all be in high demand. Jonathan Hare, ABC News.
Australians facing eviction or a looming mortgage payment they can't afford didn't get any answers today. A National Cabinet decision on rent relief has now been delayed 3 times. And as Daniel Ziffer reports, it's a delay many cannot afford.
Good catch. A big one. They want me out as soon as possible.
Kai and her daughter Elizabeth are being evicted.
Yeah, I just don't know what I'm going to do.
They've paid their rent, but coronavirus is upending normality. Her landlords have lost work, can't pay for the house they rent and want back in.
It's a very unfortunate circumstance. However, something needs to be done to prevent landlords being stuck through this time, as well as all tenants.
It's part of a wicked problem. More than 8 million Australians rent, and most landlords rely on those payments for income and to service mortgages. But with estimates of over 1 million people suddenly unemployed as industries shut and stammer, the system has hit a wall. There are problems everywhere, but priorities too. An announcement on rent policy from the National Cabinet has been delayed 3 times. Millions of Australians, like Kai and Elizabeth, are waiting for an answer.
This is a complicated issue because you've got a tenant, you've got a landlord, you've got creditors, and all of those issues, and you need to solve for the entire chain that's there.
Tasmania offers a stopgap solution. This week, its parliament passed laws banning evictions for at least the next 4 months. Australia's largest banks have already offered to pause mortgage repayments for 6 months. The measures could buy both sides of the equation valuable time. Tenants' advocates want to see an immediate stop to evictions until the crisis is over.
We have people, and we have had people for the last week, coming to us and saying, I have no income now. I can't afford to pay my rent today. So this is an urgent problem. We need to see the action immediately.
Australia's economy is deeply rooted in the value of housing. A spike in evictions and forced sales could accelerate what is already expected to be a fall in property prices. Daniel Ziffer, ABC News, Melbourne.
Childcare operators are warning centres across the country could start closing from next week. Fear of COVID-19 and the loss of jobs have seen parents withdraw their children, and childcare providers say they're now in financial peril.
Brisbane mother Rosie Sanders believes it's no longer safe for her son Jack to go to childcare.
We don't think that it's possible really with toddlers to keep them apart.
The industry says concerns like those and widespread job losses are having a dramatic impact.
Services are experiencing anywhere between 15 and 50%. And in isolated cases, I've had members that have dropped by 90% occupancy.
Kerry Marnie says his 2 childcare centres in South Australia are struggling.
People have pulled their children out of childcare centres in vast numbers in the last 4 days. It's like a panic.
Early educators are really nervous that they're not going to be paid and that they don't have any job security.
The Prime Minister says the government's working on a plan.
They are an essential part of keeping the economy running for those who are still part of it and for those who are still going to work, and we understand that.
Out-of-school hour operators say they're in the same situation.
The only way we can survive at the moment without government coming to the party and actually supporting us in regards to keeping our staff is to unfortunately shut our services and stand down our people.
Centres are trying to manage the crisis. Some are checking the temperature of all children and staff.
It's been an overwhelmingly positive response from all of our parents who have been very supportive.
But safety measures won't change Rosie Sanders' mind.
The kids are definitely staying home. We're going for short walks just around the neighbourhood.
Andre Withy, ABC News.
The pandemic has hit the pause button on life as we know it and thrown so many events and plans out the window. For families going through IVF, it's a particularly harrowing time. Fertility clinics nationwide are postponing and cancelling appointments to adhere to restrictions on elective surgery. And that's leaving many IVF patients distressed and fearing they may have just lost their chance to have children. Amelia Terzon reports.
Kate and Mitchell Van Nordini were hoping to give Micah a baby brother or sister this year. But now their IVF treatment has been put off.
We want to expand our family and basically we have to put that on hold.
Clinics around the country are postponing IVF treatments due to fears of clients contracting coronavirus and new restrictions on elective surgery.
Mitchell and I are feeling incredibly disheartened. We're feeling let down by the unknown of it.
For some, it's a matter of waiting it out. But that's not the case for Shalako Zuvic. She has a medical condition that is threatening her egg supply, and her next round of harvesting has been cancelled.
I was heartbroken, to say the very least, devastated. I wanted to be a mum since I was 10. We knew that this was going to be our last chance. Really, it means no biological children for us.
Other women have been on fertility drugs for months.
Doing this treatment that is really hard for my body. I'm 39 years old, and I just feel like this situation put me on additional stress.
The industry's peak body says clinics are doing the right thing by postponing treatments.
Each day that we continue to operate as normal, we are possibly having an impact on resources such as gowns and masks. We're potentially exposing staff, patients, our own patients included, to the virus.
The Fertility Society wants clinics to keep working with women who are at high risk of losing their eggs, such as cancer patients. It's also seeking clarity from the Federal Health Department about what IVF procedures can still go ahead. In a statement, a Federal Health Department spokesperson said that all non-urgent surgeries will be delayed or cancelled.
The whole society is going through a very difficult time, and we all have to make sacrifices to come through this.
A sacrifice of new life for some. Amelia Terzon, ABC News. Worldwide, cases of coronavirus have reached a grim milestone. The total number of infections has now eclipsed 500,000. The United States is of particular concern. Cases there have now overtaken Italy and China. It's also recorded a new high for deaths in a single day. Record numbers of Americans are applying for unemployment benefits, but despite the dire situation on Main Street, Wall Street has continued its surge. North America correspondent Catherine Diss reports from Washington.
All the patients in this room, they all have COVID.
Inside one of New York's besieged hospitals.
It really just feels like too little too late. We knew it was coming.
This is Elmhurst Hospital in Queens. 13 people died here yesterday.
There's no clear end to this. The status quo is not good enough, and that's what I'm worried about.
As the nation focused on New York, the epicentre of America's outbreak, a new hotbed has silently emerged. Louisiana is now home to the largest number of coronavirus patients per capita, behind New York and Washington state. A recent Mardi Gras festival in New Orleans is thought to have contributed to the spread.
We're on a path to look like Italy, and we need to prepare for that.
65 people have died in Louisiana. There are fears the hospital system there could collapse by April. Congress is taking steps to lessen the blow. Last night, the US Senate passed a $3.6 trillion relief package to help American workers and business. But it won't stop the jobless rate rising. 3.3 million Americans filed unemployment claims last week, a tenfold increase on the week before.
It's a lot of jobs, but I think we'll come back very strong. The sooner we get back to work, every day that we stay out, it gets harder to bring it back very quickly.
Business has basically completely ground to a halt.
Australian Michael Condren is a photographer in New York City. He and his wife now have no income.
Anything more than 3 months and we're in trouble. Anything that puts money in the hands of people to be able to, support their local businesses or to pay their rent or their mortgage, it's extremely helpful.
Despite the stark numbers, Wall Street surged for the third time this week, a sign investors believe the cash handouts will go some way towards blunting the economic impact. Catherine Diss, ABC News, Washington.
2 commercial charter flights are being arranged to rescue hundreds of Australians stranded in South America. More than 260 nationals and permanent residents have each paid thousands to get onto the first flight from Peru on Sunday. But as James Hancock reports, many other Australians have missed out on the scarce tickets home.
This emptying Peruvian hostel is temporarily home for Australians Jenna and Stacey.
We have no idea where we will stay if the hostel does shut.
Trips outdoors are heavily restricted and Peru's borders are closed to stop the spread of coronavirus.
Just down the road, a much larger hostel has a number of confirmed cases. We believe it's 14.
Their stay here is indefinite after missing out on a $5,000 ticket for a sold-out charter flight from Lima to Sydney. It's expected to take off from a military airport on Sunday with more than 260 Australians and permanent residents aboard. A second flight is being organised from Uruguay's capital, Montevideo, next week.
There's a lot of anxious people over there, and we're obviously getting a lot of phone calls and emails from people who are in quite a bit of distress.
In Bolivia, Alex and Jackson are stuck in an Airbnb apartment with another Australian couple.
I know lots of people are stuck because they couldn't get flights, but we had a flight. Yeah. We were at the airport ready to go.
That was a week ago, but they say airport staff wouldn't let them board, wrongly thinking Australia was shut off to citizens. Now there's no way out.
We just have to wait for the borders to reopen at this stage, wait for the quarantine to finish.
The Foreign Affairs Minister Maurice Payne says the government will consider supporting other commercial flights out of South America. But they're hardly the only ones wanting to get home, with about 2,500 Australians on cruise ships around the world. Maria and her brother Andrew are quarantined in a hotel in Rome after being let off the coronavirus hit Costa Luminosa. They say there's almost 40 Australian cruise passengers at the hotel, and some are older and unwell.
Somehow we'll get home, but they need to go home.
They're at risk of dying.
They're really at risk of dying.
The way out remains uncertain. James Hancock, ABC News.
Rural doctors are pleading with grey nomads not to head to the outback this winter to avoid bringing COVID-19 with them. Few hospitals in regional areas have intensive care beds, and doctors fear it could put an intense strain on air services to have to fly patients to the major centres.
It's considered a rite of passage for many older Australians.
Been on the road for about 5 months now.
But as borders shut and domestic travel is curbed, the options are becoming limited for grey nomads. That's why Graham McGeady is heading back to Brisbane to be with his family.
A little bit apprehensive, considering there's more and more cases being reported. I think I'm safer out in the country.
This remote tourist park in northwest Queensland would normally host thousands of tourists over the coming months, but not this year.
If we do have anybody that turns up at Adele's, we'll be basically turning them away and heading them back out of the Shire.
People need to understand, especially older people who are travelling, that we just will not have the resources to look after them if large numbers of tourists come through our region this year.
Those resources are already pushed. With limited intensive care beds in Western Queensland, several shires in this area have taken the drastic step of banning all non-essential travel. Many fear an outbreak of COVID-19 could put unnecessary pressure on the Royal Flying Doctor Service, transferring patients to the East Coast. Rural doctors say an overloaded RFDS would be disastrous for tourists.
They may not be at the top of the list, and it may be that they're stuck in a town a long way from their family. They may even need to be palliated, and they might die in a place that is far from where they live.
Eric Barker, ABC News, Mount Isa.
Investors in Australia did not follow the lead from Wall Street. The local market succumbed to another day of selling. Here's Philip Lasker.
Well, Wall Street's massive recovery, which has seen it surge more than 20% this week, played well throughout Asia. All that money being thrown around by governments is encouraging investors, and so we saw rises in Europe, Japan and Hong Kong. There was no vote of confidence here, though, as investors sought to take profits while the virus continues to spread. Australia is still a long way from bull market territory, but we can say it was up for the week. Commercial landlords who are in for a rough time fell sharply, and so did the banks. Charter Hall and Scentre Group took a hammering. Energy companies were also sold off. In fact, oil demand is in free fall. Here are the expectations before and after the coronavirus. Analysts say consumption has dropped between 15 and 20 million barrels a day because because of the coronavirus and the price war between Russia and Saudi Arabia. The Prime Minister's message that this is a Team Australia moment doesn't seem to have filtered through to the petrol retailers. The gap between wholesale and retail petrol prices is the widest this year. Another reason to stay home. There's been a spike in people studying up on economic depressions. Not quite as many as during the global financial crisis, though. You thought a recession was bad. Here's your quick depression guide. GDP nearly minus 10%, inflation minus 11%, and unemployment peaking not far off 20%. We're expecting to get at least halfway there, which will be painful enough. The Australian dollar is back above 61 US cents, and that's finance.
Horse racing resumed in Australia today after jockey Mark Zahra was cleared of COVID-19. Earlier this month, Zahra was on a domestic flight with a person who had the virus, but the jockey's test result has come back negative. Races have been cancelled over the past 2 days, but they resumed in regional Victoria today. Race days will be held in 5 states tomorrow. Zahra will be back in the saddle in Bendigo. The AFL has reached a pay deal with the game's male players after their season was postponed because of the coronavirus. Under the agreement, players will receive 50% of their salaries up until the 31st of May. After that, players will be paid according to how many games they play this season. Crowd numbers and the viability of the AFL's sponsors will also determine salaries. It's time for the weather now. Here's Paul Higgins.
And Tam, it's beach weather again. But of course, we're being told not to go there this weekend. So here's what we're missing out on. At least there's a lot of social distancing going on there, unlike at St Kilda today. Clear skies over much of the state meant a cool start to the day, down to 3 at Mortlake in the west and Omeo in the east. There have been some echoes just out here in the west on the rain radar this afternoon, but little has hit the gauges. 21 degrees at Portland, 19 at the Prom, but at the other end of the scale, 30 at Hopetoun, Mildura, Oyen and Walpeup. A weak sea breeze kept the day to 21 on the Surf Coast, but got up to 26 at Geelong and 27.6 at Melbourne City at 2:46 this afternoon. Right now outside, it's a very pleasant 25 degrees. More showers today along the Queensland coast. Innisfail in the north had 155 millimetres of rain in 24 hours. Perth had its coolest day for a week. There's some patchy cloud over Western Victoria with a weak upper-level trough, and you can see a cold front heading for Western Australia. That is the same front that will move into Western Victoria Sunday afternoon to reach central parts in the evening, but warm northerly winds before that. More showers tomorrow along the Queensland and northern New South Wales coast with those onshore winds, and also in the nation's southwest. Perth will have some early showers, in Brisbane afternoon showers, and Sydney late showers. Hobart will be sunny and Adelaide mostly sunny, Canberra partly cloudy. Well, back home, we'll fast forward to Sunday. This is Sunday. Scattered showers will spread from the west during the afternoon, with thunderstorms expected over central and eastern areas. And tomorrow, cloud will increase over the west in the afternoon with the chance of a shower there. Patchy morning fog in Gippsland, warm and partly cloudy with a north to northeasterly wind. On the bays, a north to northeasterly, 10 to 20 knots in the morning, 25 knots in the afternoon. Well, down to 16 in Melbourne tonight, mostly sunny in the morning, a bit of cloud coming in the afternoon, but no rain. A fresh north wind will take us to 27, 29 in Geelong. On Sunday, 26 cloud building through the day, some showers and thunderstorms in the afternoon and evening, 2 to 8 millimetres of rain and a fresh north wind again. Monday back to 20 with a possible morning shower. Tuesday morning fog, then partly cloudy 21. For April Fool's Day Wednesday, a mostly sunny 22, then a few showers Thursday and again on Friday, Tam.
Thank you, Paul. Now, before we go tonight, just a recap of the main developments today. The Alfred Hospital has confirmed 4 patients, including 2 men who died yesterday, and 3 staff tested positive to COVID-19. The hospital is now testing and contact tracing in a desperate attempt to stop the virus spreading. And the Prime Minister has enlisted the Defence Force to ensure all arrivals from abroad self-isolate in hotels for 2 weeks. And for all the very latest, whenever you want it, head to abc.net.au/coronavirus or the ABC News channel. That's it for this evening's bulletin. Mary Gearan will be back in the chair tomorrow night. Thanks for your company. Stay well. Good night.